Tennessee accent, but I promise you, I was born in Connecticut. I don't know how this happened in my life. But I am thrilled to be here and so grateful to be learning so much more about Do More Good and to share a couple thoughts. Really, all I'm going to do in my time with you is try to add a couple phrases to the already numerous phrases that we think about when we think about doing more good. And that's my goal. So, for the first one, I want to talk about leading with love. Like most of you, you've had an evolution about what your leadership looks like. I did start out in that whole era of servant leadership. That was where I started. And I started my work there and love so much about it. But for me, there was something missing in that. So I started out, went to Vanderbilt Divinity School, got ordained, and decided to open up communities for women. Women who were survivors of trafficking, prostitution, and addiction. And the women that I have served for the last 25 years have been women who know a lot about this, maybe the negative or the shadow side of what servanthood is. And for a lot of us, including myself, whose sexual abuse history started at around the age of 6 and went on for years, it takes on some pretty scary parts to lead in that way, because the idea is that authority is probably the biggest trigger in our lives. When you have that sense of unsafety and uncertainty, you need to be on equal ground. If we're all going to lead and be together, there need to be equal footing. So Thistle Farms started 1997, one house in Nashville, Tennessee. It's now a global movement for women's freedom. We have more than 600 beds around the U.S., long-term free beds with no authority, living in the house with women who come together in community to do the healing work. We have 36 global partners, employing about 1,400 women. And we do this in a way in which we share this model of leadership where we remember that in justice, it's a non-competitive sport, and that we can support and care for one another, and all of us prosper in that work. So I moved away from just servant leadership, and I thought maybe it's more of a Brene Brown thing, daring leadership. And then I realized that a lot of times all that daring stuff meant, and when people want to have brave conversations, it was just mean. Somebody wants to have a mean conversation with you. It's just I'm super sensitive. You'll see that as we go through this, that it's like, really, I wasn't a brave leader. That did not, again, really encompass this idea of a movement coming together for women's freedom. And then I thought about inspired leadership. That's what it is. We're going to be inspired, and we've been inspired all along at Thistle Farms. We started for the first 4 years just housing. 2 years, no cost. You do all that you need to do to be a great person in this world and go out, and we'll all be serving one another in love. And then I realized that in truth, if we were just doing housing, we weren't really caring for women or developing leadership, and that's why we started a bath and body care company back in 2000. And it is the largest justice enterprise of its kind run by survivors in the U.S. It's doing well. We have products out there, and if you have any compassion at all, you'll buy something. It'll be the way to go out this door. I was thinking when he said one thing, I was thinking maybe he means at least one thing in shopping. Anyway, so the women that I served on average first went to the streets around 15 years old, first experienced on average abuse between the ages of 7 and 11. And so we had to start this company. We had to do this work, and I mostly have been inspired all along to keep changing, to have that vision of a 100-year company. But in truth, one of my big crises of realizing that I wasn't an inspired leader happened here in Nebraska. We have a sister community here in Omaha called Magdalene of Omaha, and they have, you know it, Thistle Lights is their enterprise that they work with. And I was feeling really gray. And I was just like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I've been doing this for so long. But I came and I did what I was supposed to. And when I landed in November in Nebraska, I had no idea how gray this state was. And I was like feeling all this gray internally. And then the trees were gray and the sky was gray and the buildings were gray and everything, the ground was gray. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe that's what it means to be done. But I did what I do. You know, I went to the cathedral in Omaha and I preached and I met with the foundations and raised money so we could open a house and talk to the local papers. I did all of it. And always I get to travel with amazing women who are survivor leaders in this world and running the company. Out at the table today, when you go, you'll meet two of the great graduates from the community, Lanita and Angela, and they've come from different enterprises that we have. One, Angela was working at the cafe, and Lanita was working in the logistics. They both got their degrees to be counselors, and they work on the team that does all the residential programming. Everybody on that team is a graduate, including the director of all the residential services, who went back and not only got her college degree, but her master's degree in this world, and just amazing. So I was traveling with a woman named Sophia. She had never flown before, so she was super excited to come to Nebraska in November. But what I realized on that trip is nobody cares if you're inspired. And it started dawning on me, like, nobody really cares if you're inspired to do your work. You're getting paid. This is your job. Go do it. Do you know, like, as a mother, I raised 3 sons, and never once did any of them ask me or just wonder, like, I bet she's had a really tough day in this community of Thistle Farms. That's really tough. She's probably not inspired to come home and cook and say to me, why don't you just go watch an episode of Law and Order? Have something to drink. We'll make dinner and bring it to you. But it's like somehow when we think about purpose and justice and this work that has deeper meaning, we think we have to be inspired. Anyway, I did the work, got on the plane, and I was feeling really sorry for myself like this because Sophia had never flown before and she didn't realize that cardinal rule, do not cross the armrest. And I realized she had pushed me all the way out of the way, and she was looking at the window, and we were about 20,000 feet up, and we had broken through all the grayness of the clouds, and there was a supermoon. And it was haloed and bright, and those gray clouds had blues and deep purples all weaving through them. And she said, I didn't know there was a sky above the clouds. I mean, can you imagine? Not knowing there was something beyond the gray. But really, why should she? She ran away from a foster home when she was in 6th grade, where she was horribly mistreated in inhumane ways, and she was on the streets and in detention centers through her teen years, and then we did to her what we do to people, and we graduated her to prison at 18. So she had seen the underside of bridges, the inside of prison walls, the short side of justice, the back side of anger, but she had never seen the top side of a cloud. And I said, Sophia, I'm good for another 5 years. I can trust, if I can keep doing this work, that muse will come my way called inspiration again if we keep doing this. If we keep working and building our leadership and keep showing up and doing this work, our inspiration will come. And that's when I decided, you know what, it's really about love. And I'm going to claim love as the most powerful force for change that we have. And it doesn't need to be relegated to interpersonal relationships and spirituality. It can be a model for how we lead in our business and in our work. And I believe that with my whole heart. The other phrase that I would like to introduce into this conversation is justice enterprise. And we've talked a lot about social enterprise, and I think that's a vast realm where you have businesses that are doing all these great things that we've talked about. But if you're coming from a space of not-for-profit work, if you're coming from a place of developing products to build a mission, it's a different thing. And let me tell you why. It costs more, period. And there is a shared responsibility we have to be able to pay those extra costs for training, for education. We do not lay off people in our lean months, let's say. And we are willing to work with people, for 6 months just to figure out how to send an email. Those are costs. But none of the women that I have served ever went to the streets by themselves. It took a bunch of broken systems and people to get them there. And it takes a community to welcome them home in big and beautiful ways. The way Forbes magazine described the work of Thistle Farms, it was, they are a mission with a business, not a business with a mission. So I will say that what I would like, #Justice Enterprise, is for us to understand that when the workforce is the mission, that it becomes a subset of social enterprise that requires some special attention. So anybody that uses that, thank you, because it acknowledges the truth of what we're talking about in the different layers of doing good within the business model. So what leading with love looks like is it's creating our work, I believe, like a love letter. It's diving into our deepest ideals and committing ourselves to right action. That's it. It's just saying, I get to live into my ideals. That is my right and my freedom, and I do not have to compromise. And I can figure out what it means to love this world in the marketplace. What does the market bear for love? That's a decent question. And we found out if you stamp Love Heals on all your products, you can charge about 10% more. The next thing I've learned about leading with love is that it frees me to be with people in a different way. That none of us have to be heroes in this work of justice or seeking healing in our communities or for ourselves or our families. That we can just be hosts, not heroes. That's so nice. It means we're creating the space, the resources, and the time so that people can do their own heroic work. We recognize the heroic work that people are doing as they're growing and engaging a movement. The next thing about leading with love to me is we've all been told in a way through, I guess there was some slide up there about 80% of what we see shows capitalism in a bad light. About 99% of what we see on how people enact justice in the world shows it like we never have any money and you have to do everything super cheap. So like I said, I've been an ordained Episcopal priest for 31 years. I know, right? It just seems like, I know, I'm not a very good priest. But if I was to go out and raise $20 million to build a cathedral, nobody would bat an eye. It's a beacon for the city. It inspires people. People come together to do all this work. If I go out and say, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a shelter for women, people expect you to do it on the cheap. But if we built shelters like cathedrals, it would be radical. It would change the way we see the city. And we say we want to improve and keep going. And what does love look like in brick and mortar? So in 2005, we built our first house for $1 million for 8 women to come live for 2 years. And it's not a shelter. It's not a halfway house. It's their home. It's considered permanent residence when it's 2 years. Women come together and live and graduate. About 80% of the women that come in all graduate 2 years later, all with lengthy criminal records, horrible trafficking stories. Come and stay. They find work, they pay taxes, they get their children back, they fall in love, they go back to school. All those beautiful things happen, and what we realize is that you can build a home, $1 million home with everything that you would want for 8 women, and it costs about half of what it costs in that home than it costs to keep a woman in prison for the same time. Half the cost. We just had a woman come to our community this year who's been in the Tennessee State Prison for Women for 34 years. Our state invested $2 million in her. She went in her early 20s and came out in her late 50s on a cane. That's what that investment was. And you think about what it is we want to invest with, and I think about return on investment, and it's like we can do a lot better. We can think and know in this work with purpose, with love for justice, freedom, and peace, that we can be lavish and economical. We can be safer as a community. The women are safer. And we can heal communities. All the data in the world shows if you invest in women, you heal communities. And you rape women and you kill communities. That's why it's an act of war. That is just the facts of how it looks. So I believe if we can proclaim that we want to be loving as a community, welcoming women home, it's a way to invest and heal our whole communities in a lavish and economical way. And I also think that leading with love is a defiant act. All afternoon, I'm telling you, I'm on WhatsApp. I've been getting these texts from the women in Ukraine. Our latest endeavor in Ukraine is for women who are all refugees from the Russian invasion. They come from eastern Ukraine. They contacted us. They wanted to organize, and they started making blankets. And they look like sunrises. They look like sunrises. And it's called Love Rises, and we have all the blankets at the table that we have. It's really hard to get them out. I think we have a total of 6 blankets right now, but we have some beautiful socks that will make your Nebraska life so much better. So this week, one of the things the women are doing, they've all gone to a spa in the westernmost part of Ukraine for a 3-day trip. And they're there just to breathe and to relax. They have outperformed anybody's expectations because women take about 10 minutes to organize and can do everything about twice as fast and figuring out how to invest back into their communities. And we've had, it's been this beautiful, amazing response. And they just, like I said on WhatsApp, just texted and said, "We love you." That's the language they chose to express their gratitude and the fact that for them, hope is survival. And coming together and doing this work is their survival right now. Nobody just wants to be a refugee, they remind us. The dignity of work and doing something beautiful that people can see. So here's the truth. Each blanket probably costs about $600-700 to make once you ship the yarn in and ship it all and pay the women and grow this company. But what we charge is $350 for a blanket. And that pays a woman's salary for a week. So they each make $350 a week. in addition to what they are getting in their refugee status in Western Ukraine. But it is this beautiful effort that we're trying to keep going and doing together. But it's defiant to say love rises in the midst of war. Isn't that awesome? Or y'all have to be quiet? Is that part of the rule in here? Yes, that is awesome. And going and being with the women is probably one of the greatest joys I've had. The other thing that has led me this year, and this is just my meditation after being with the women in Ukraine and about what it means to lead with love, is to know I'm not crying for people anymore or feeling sorry for people, but I get to weep with. There's a difference between crying and weeping. The distinction is as subtle as between wrinkles and lines. Foundational cracks made by separating sadness from lament changes structure. Infinitesimal lines in sand between compassion and empathy are hard to cross. The differences are knowing our sense of touch goes deeper than skin. Weeping is knowing we don't need to be heroes but hosts. To weep is a lament full of compassion. To weep is a sign of love rooting in the longing for life. To weep is to know the fullness of a mother hen wanting to gather her chicks. To weep is to grieve the possibility of a requited love lost. Weeping is a holy act. It's not just a kind and beautiful thing to lead with love. I promise you, I believe it changes marketplaces, workforce, and engagement. That when we talk about that our commitment is to love one another in our work, it's about respect, it's about longevity, it's about consistency. It's about being relevant. How you love in a workplace looks very different. When a woman comes into Thistle Farms, loving her might really look like a basket. It has brand new bras in it because you've just come from prison, and a blanket from Ukraine, and some amazing bath and body care products from Thistle Farms. 6 months down the road, it might look like teeth and restitution with the courts and somebody that's going to walk you through the credit process. 18 months down the road, it might look like paid vacation and a retirement fund. Love looks like that in different forms, and it changes as we move and as we grow together. But it reminds us we are committed to one another, and that we are taking this intentional walk together and be together. That's a group of women that were in Greece at a refugee camp, all from Syria, who the first year we were there in 2017 wouldn't let us take their picture. They were weaving life vests into welcome mats to remind people that the link between human trafficking and refugees is close-knit. It's no accident that the most vulnerable women end up in the most desolate places, right? And how we bring each other back into community, justice, enterprise is a huge part of that. By the time we went back that next year, just so you know, Banksy loved the idea of the welcome mats and took it up and started promoting it. And they had 54 weavers. And that's the photo they wanted. And that's the image I want to leave you with, of a group of people calling themselves Love Welcome, saying, first, we don't want our photo made. Then when they come together and become community and generate funds to heal their community and to take care of their children, they order matching shirts, and they're doing this. Do you see me? Do you hear my story? I have something to say. So what does it look like for us to do this long-term love and leadership to grow a movement for women's freedom? So I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. My husband's in the Songwriting Hall of Fame. He wrote stuff like Bless the Broken Road and Cowboy Take Me Away, some of those old school country songs. And we have friends who have all graduated from music schools, Fisk, Belmont, that came together. This is a little song called Love Revival, and it's some of the movements for women's freedom around the world that we've been working on for 25 years, just to remind you again and again and again that our job is to love the world until we get it right. Well, you're going to have to crank it up.
Hallelujah, little revival.